My name is Becky Anderson, and I work for Macmillan. Thank you guys very much for coming today. We're doing a series of webinars this week, and this one is the role of technology in course redesign with Mike Palmquist. The way this is going to work, because there's so many of you, which is great, we have muted all of you. Please do not be offended. The way this is going to work is Mike is going to do his presentation, and if you have any questions along the way or at the end, you can type them into the chat field or into the Q&A field. Some of you guys have figured out how to do that already, and absolutely we welcome questions. Mike's going to talk for about a half an hour, and then we'll have time to answer any questions. So with that, I want to introduce Mike Palmquist. Mike is at Colorado State University and is in a new role as the Associate Provost there, dealing with university-wide efforts regarding course redesign. He's very familiar with this topic, has learned a lot, and hopefully, I know this is a hot topic, which is why we have so many attendees, hopefully he can share some of what he's learned with you guys, and you can save yourself some pain and learn some new stuff today. So with that, I'm going to pass the ball over to Mike, who can then show his slides.
Hi, folks. Thanks for coming. This is kind of cool. It's very odd giving a talk where you can't see anybody or hear anybody, so I'll try to do something to make that work. Let's get started. I'm going to skip over this first slide since you've been seeing that title for a while. But here's what I'd like to talk about. I'm going to move from a really large set of pictures to, or kind of a large overview, into some more specific things about technology. So I'm going to show how technology is really nested in a larger course redesign process, as opposed to just sort of adding it on. It'll be something that we turn to as part of sort of the larger choices we can make as we do course redesign. So at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe some philosophical issues about technology, and before we get to that point, I'll be talking about some examples of how you might use things and what some of the technologies you might use are. And then ideally we'll have time for discussion, so hopefully I'll stay within my half-hour limit. And Becky is saying, yes, you will, Mike. So when we look at course design emphases, I started directing our Institute for Learning and Teaching in 2006. It was a brand new institute. And one of the first things they asked us to do, which was beyond the job description, was to start working on course redesign. And so we started thinking about it. We did the research. We looked at everything. We tried to get a sense of what was going on. And over a period of years, we really started to formalize a little bit what we really looked for in a course redesign. And so we wanted to challenge students. We wanted to engage students. We wanted to provide interaction and feedback, and we wanted to increase time on task. And I'm noticing that I have challenging students in the middle, and that should really say the course. So I'm not sure what happened there. I think I've looked at these slides about 10 times, but there you go. The challenging students part really is focusing on critical thinking. And it's not necessarily more critical thinking, it's the right critical thinking. It's given the level of this course, the type of students, what we're trying to accomplish, are we doing the right things in terms of challenging them? So sometimes the challenge level is too high. I've seen a number of courses at our university where really the faculty were trying to do too much. They weren't articulating their course very well with what students were coming into the classroom with. So the challenging notion is finding the right challenge. It's not simply making it harder. Engaging students, though, is something that we want to do in all of our courses. I think you're probably all familiar with courses where students walk into the classroom once or twice a week. Maybe they skip a week after a while. They don't put a lot of effort into the course. And at the end of the semester, they just kind of taken the exams, and maybe they've gotten a passing grade. What we're trying to do now is increase students' kind of commitment to the course, getting them interested in what's going on, getting them to think about what's happening in the course and actually starting to do things. And as part of that, we provide interaction and feedback on their work and things like that. And overall, the whole goal is to increase the amount of time that students spend on the course. So you can put together a pretty poor course, particularly like an online course, that might only take an hour or two a week to really keep up with and do well. And you can do the same thing with a lecture course where students don't show up much. They read only when necessary, like to take the exam. We actually want them to spend a lot more time than that on the course. And so if that's one of the emphases that we've put together in our course redesign. In terms of the challenges that we face when we're putting together a course, so we have a group of instructional designers, and that group has grown from 0 when I started to about a dozen people now that we have working on courses across the university. And we're actually hiring 5 more people. So if you know any good instructional designers, let them know. What we've found is that it just takes a lot of time to really do a good job with redesigning a course. That shouldn't be a surprise to any of us, I think. But you can't just do an assembly line process. You have to really think about what is the faculty member trying to accomplish, what is the course all about, what are the students like, and we really have to think about it carefully, and that just takes time. There's also an issue, and I ran into this when I was working with writing across the curriculum, which is something I still work on. We would ask faculty to integrate writing into their courses. So that's one type of innovation. So you can look at writing across the curriculum, flipping the classroom, active learning, experiential learning, using technology in substantial ways, things like that. All of those things take time. And it's tough. We get these faculty that say, yeah, I'd love to do writing across the curriculum, but I don't have 40 hours to put into this. Or I'd like to introduce these new technologies, but I'm not sure I've got the time to really keep up with everything else that I'm doing. And that ties right into this third bullet, which is competing faculty priorities. Many people are at institutions where innovation in teaching is not rewarded as strongly as it might be. There are competing priorities. At my own institution, that's research and publication and getting money for external funding for research, things like that. And so when you start thinking about what you want to do, you often end up into a case where faculty might have too many courses. Maybe they're working on 5 or 6 courses at once. They're teaching those courses, and they don't have time to do more. Maybe they're being asked to serve on a lot of committees or advise a lot of students. Maybe they're being asked to publish a lot or to generate research money, and it all takes time. And you come in and say, we'd like to redesign your course. And then they say, yeah, that's great. I'd love to do it philosophically, but I don't think practically I can do it this semester. Let's come back and try it later. So what we started looking at was, what might we do? We came up with this notion that we called a learning ecologies approach to course redesign. Because what we really started to notice was that faculty could be successful if we provided support to them, and that support could take a variety of different forms. So over time we developed this ecologies approach, and its principles are to recognize the fact that there's competition for faculty time and effort, that we have to be respectful of faculty and instructor time. We have to be thinking about all the things that they're facing. And we have to just not walk in and say, well, any good teacher would want to do the following things. Of course they want to, but they may not be able to. And we have to really respect and recognize the competition there. The second thing is we really wanted to stop thinking about the course as an isolated object. A lot of the research and a lot of the theory I was looking at early on was really emphasizing clarifying your course objectives, which is critical. And then it would be like, let's look at the curriculum, let's look at the assignments, let's look at this, that, and the other thing. Everything was like within the course. You'd almost be so focused in on the course that you'd forget that it's part of a larger program, that it's part of a course of study, that it's part of an institutional context. And so we started to say, well, what if we looked at the course as part of this larger campus event or this larger institutional context? So with that in mind, we started looking at our third principle, which is to look at the institution's learning environment for support. There are things you can do at a number of institutions. There might be a tutoring program. There might be a writing center. There might be a teaching and learning center. And you can look to these things for support, and I'll show that on the next slide. And the final thing that we started to do is say, okay, if we're going to involve faculty and instructors in these courses, we really need to think about how we support them, how we reward them, how we make it easier to actually get through the course redesign process, and then ultimately how we make it easier for them to teach courses so that they can do it efficiently and effectively and still accomplish those 4 goals of challenging students, engaging students, supporting interaction and feedback, and increasing time on task. So we end up with this schematic that starts with the course in the middle. And this is the course in isolation. And then we started unisolating it, de-isolating it. We said the course is part of the program of study. You can look to see what's going on in other courses. You can see if there are learning programs such as tutoring or academic skills workshops or study groups or any number of activities that you might have that would support the course, so that even if you just sent your students to tutoring, that's X number of hours per week that they might be engaging in outside the class, that as an instructor, you don't have to be really working in other than encouraging them to do that, or maybe, and certainly, we hope, working with a tutoring program to help them understand your goals for the class. We looked at engagement programs such as service learning, undergraduate research, things like that, and we asked, is there a role in a particular course for these kinds of programs? There might be in some of our courses, certainly in a minority of our courses, we've made strong connections to undergraduate research and to service learning and community engagement. So there's a set of resources that you can add to the course that will allow students to engage with important issues and learn quite a bit more. We started working really closely with our library. I think it's surprising. I mean, we always put things on reserve. We look at the library as faculty and we ask all kinds of questions about it. But at many institutions, certainly at mine, librarians are faculty members who have a very strong mission to enhance learning and teaching, and they become really important partners. They often provide resources that help us do things to make our courses better. We also tied in really closely with our learning communities. I'm at Colorado State University. About 40% of our entering freshman class participate in learning communities of various kinds, from the honors program to various service programs to academic communities and things aligned with various colleges. And so we work very closely with them in terms of study groups and getting them involved in our tutoring and academic skills programs, of actually teaching courses in partnership with them and starting to redesign their courses. And then we started looking at the writing program. Most institutions have a writing program that might be stronger at some institutions than at others, but there are some incredible resources there. And when we started thinking about challenging our students, one of the things that we found most frequently happens is that when you really start to go with critical thinking skills like analyzing or evaluating or applying things, you often would reflect your work by writing about it or making presentations about it. And so the writing program has become a really strong partner for us. Other campus partners that we started looking at, look at your campus and see who's there. We had a group called the Geospatial Centroid. The centroid, as it turns out, is the centermost part of an irregular polygon. So they were actually kind of being fancy about calling themselves a center. They came to talk to me about doing some professional development for faculty, so faculty would be more familiar with the work they were doing with GIS. And we started talking about it. In the middle of that conversation, I asked them if they might be interested in working with us on course redesign. And they looked puzzled for a minute, but it's turned out to be a really useful partnership. They create data sets for us, and we work with them to create ways to have students interact with that data. So you might have a freshman walking around our campus looking at the different types of trees that have been planted by our forestry department. And we've got a very strong forestry program here, and they can walk around and see the age of the tree. They can do assessments. They can walk around and see the distribution of different types of trees. We've done things with elk in Rocky Mountain National Park and things like that. So they put together some really interesting programs that are all based around GIS, and they become a very valuable campus partner for us. And we'll show you one of the things that they've done later on. And finally, we looked at instructional technology. There are people across campus that do all kinds of things with instructional technology. We've got our main units. We've got units inside of our colleges. Some departments have labs and things like that. And we started looking at, okay, so how can we make use of this to improve the course? And so overall, we moved from the course as a thing in and of itself to looking out from the course to all these resources at the institutional level that might help you improve the course. So as we did that, we started to see some results. On this next slide, I'm going to show you what happened when we started linking course redesign to our tutoring program. So we had, I went too far. We had put together a tutoring program. We were working in partnership with them the first year that we moved into a new building. So they moved us from the basement of one of our campus buildings into the old library. They remodeled it. It's a beautiful place, very large. And we've got this large room that we use for tutoring from 5 to 10 every night except Fridays and Saturdays. And this tutoring program that we started partnering with had a high water mark of about 3,000 student visits per year. They moved into the building. We did a big marketing push, and we got it up to 4,500 in 2009, 2010. And then during that year, we started to link it to course redesign. So the director of our tutoring program worked with our instructional designers and then started going out to talk to the individual faculty that were teaching courses. And the next year, we doubled that. We went to 9,000 student visits. We went up to 11,000 the next year, 13,000 the next year. And this year, we're looking like we're continuing to grow, largely because we've connected course redesign to tutoring. And what's interesting about this is that I set a challenge for our director of tutoring, and I said, nationally, tutoring typically attracts students that are 3.0 GPAs and above, like a B or better students. And I said the real issue here is that we're not getting the students who might be struggling in the course who the extra time might really help them improve. We're getting the students that want to move from a B to an A, which is great, but it would be really nice if there was no significant difference between the students who are taking the course and the students who are going to tutoring, at least statistically. And so that was a challenge I set for them. We worked on marketing, we worked on tying it into course redesign, and by the end of the 2010-2011 year, we saw no significant difference based on our institutional research assessments of the students who were attending tutoring. So it looked like the full spectrum of students, and that was great. We actually, by the end of 2013, we'd actually increased our minority participation, which we thought was part of our mission. Colorado is moving towards majority minority probably in the next 15, 20 years, and we need to have as much participation as we can from our students. And so that turned out to be something useful. And it's grown a lot. But more importantly, and I'll show you on this page, the students who go to tutoring are actually doing better. Now, we can argue about whether there's any causal relationship to this, but in general, it used to be that students, the better students would go so they get better grades. Now that we have an even distribution of students across our student body going to the courses, we started controlling for what we call entering index scores. So we look at students' class ranking or their GPA in high school. We look at entering test scores like the SAT or the ACT, and we hold those constant. And we say, if you went to tutoring, how well did you do in the course compared to students who had comparable profiles but didn't go? And we were seeing, maybe a small total going up from 0.14 to 0.17 over the couple of years that we've looked at this now, the last 2 years. But we saw some really larger increases, like almost a third to maybe in calculus half a grade point higher if you went there. And we thought that had a lot to do with the amount of time you were spending per week working on this. So if you were just increasing the amount of time and your engagement with the course, we saw improvements in what was going on. So that was nice. And it's been something that people have been paying attention to here, and more faculty now are getting interested in getting students involved in tutoring. We started another program that was used a number of different models initially, but has kind of developed into sort of one of two programs. Either the study group leaders will go into a classroom and work with students there, or they'll do sort of remote tutoring. They'll meet at different times, and they'll really focus in on that course. We've doubled the number of students. We've got about 3,000 students, maybe 4,000 this year participating. And in general, these students tended to skew a little bit towards the less prepared end of our group. So the work that we did with course redesign to launch these study groups really seemed to be making a difference. And what we're finding is that these students, when they go to study groups more than 3 times per semester, are actually getting 2/3 of a grade point higher. So they're going from like a B- to a B+ or an A-, and somewhere in that range. And so we were really happy about that. And again, we're seeing higher levels of minority student participation. We think that has a lot to do with the encouragement that our faculty are doing and some of the participation we're getting from the learning programs or learning communities that we're doing. So overall, when we started linking our courses out to learning programs, we saw some things that were really going well. We've seen similar things in service learning, but we don't have statistical numbers on that. We're seeing other things. So the keys to success for making this learning ecologies approach work was seeking partners among faculty that were involved in course redesign, and then looking at these partners across campus that would work with them. And so I've mentioned some of these already, but we've worked with the library. We work closely with our GIS center. work very closely with our writing program, particularly the Writing Across the Curriculum group and the Writing Center. We have a group on campus called the Little Shop of Physics, and it's what it sounds like. It's very dramatic, but it's all about active learning and demonstrations and students' hands-on activities during classes. And the director of that, Brian Jones, will come in and work with our faculty individually to help them, even though their discipline is nothing like physics. He can provide them with ideas about what he's done, and it's spawned a lot of really interesting innovations that's been going on. And then we've been putting together technology groups, working with our Academic Computing and Networking Services group, with the group that supports the use of our LMS, which is Blackboard, the Learning Management System, and things like that. So by partnering with people, by really actively working with faculty and then with partnering with these groups across campus and bringing them all together, we've been able to get faculty to look outside the course and start thinking about how this will all work and how it will all pull together. So technology is part of the learning ecology. We've started to think about what role it might play as we try to transform courses and make them more effective. I mean, there's been a lot of talk recently about the 21st century classroom and everybody should be changing, but if you look around your campuses, you might be at an institution like ours where an awful lot of the courses aren't all that distinguishable from what we might have been using in 1939, which is, I think, when the Scantron came out. Lots of lecture, slide presentations, although we're using PowerPoint now more, or maybe Prezi. But the classes don't look that different. If we're really going to change our schools and change the way we're teaching, we need to be thinking about some of the new tools that are available to us because they've got some transformative power to them, I think. So I've been looking at the different types of technology like information technology, productivity software, the various types of instructional technology out there, social media, things like that, interactive tools. And we've tried to understand what role they might play in achieving our course development goals. And equally important, we've tried to understand some of their pitfalls, how they could be used, how they might not be used. We've seen some pretty bad use of technology. I think there's a good reason why they have death by PowerPoint as kind of a common theme running across a lot of universities and colleges. In terms of challenging students, what I want to do is break out these various technologies that you might use and try to map this on there. So if you've got the PDF for this and you've downloaded that, then you can take a look at this more closely later. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on these things. But generally, we've been finding in our course redesign efforts that when we want to challenge students, we've been looking at things like adaptive quiz tools. A lot of the folks out there coming up with this are independent companies like Newton that are doing this. There are universities like Carnegie Mellon with their open learning initiative that have been doing some really nice adaptive quiz tool work. There's games out there. For years, people have been talking about gamification. We're going to actually show you an example of that from one of our interior design courses. And then we have scenario and simulation tools that people put together, things like imagine you're in this situation, or imagine you're in a law class and you're testing, you're going to be working on this case. Here's all the information you need. Here's who you are and what you're trying to do. So there's a lot of things we can do to really kind of get students and challenge them and start thinking, wait a minute, I have to do more than memorize here. I have to do more than understand something. I actually have to do something with it. So we try to figure out how we can use these tools to challenge students. So as an example, we started using learning games in interior design, and this is a class taught by one of our best professors. And we ended up developing 3 games. I think some of the students didn't quite know what all these Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game is, or the $100,000 Pyramid, or Jeopardy. Most of them knew it a little bit. But she put these together with our instructional designers, and it was an online tool, and it ended up that she used them a lot in class, in groups, and then the students would use them later on as study aids. So let me show you quickly what one of them looked like. This is the Who Wants to Be a Lighting Designer. So this is the opening screen on this. And they would typically project this in front of the classroom, or like I said, if the students were doing it in groups, they'd maybe do it on a laptop and just be sharing it, or with the study groups maybe in their dorm room or at home. There'd be questions like the lighting designer, and you'd move up the pyramid, kind of going from the $10,000 to $25,000 question, and you had different options, 50-50, or I'm going to call a lifeline, or I'm going to ask for the audience. And so, for example, Here's a question. This code requires a switch by every door in residential occupancies, primarily for safety and convenience, and you pick the answer. And what would be going on is you'd usually have somebody in front of the classroom, and they would be talking it out loud as they're doing it, and the other members of the class would get engaged. And we watched what was going on, and it turned out to be a much more interesting class, and the students actually seemed to learn a lot more than if it was just being lectured on. And they would do things like poll the audience by a show of hands or things like that. So the person up in front could say, all right, I'm not sure who thinks it's this or that, or et cetera. So it was kind of neat to watch how this was going on. And our instructional designers worked really closely with people, and it seemed to work out well. In terms of engaging students, we've done a lot of work with instructional modules. You'll often see these in a learning management system for a face-to-face or a blended or an online course, where this week we'll be studying this, and so you've got like a web page built in there with some images, maybe some data, charts. You might have video in there as well. You might have self-assessments, and people would use that. And this would just take a while to work through. It's sort of like writing a small textbook in a sense. Each week might have a module, or each class session might have something attached to it. And so you could actually put together your own version of a textbook and work through it. And students would have to take time on it. And if you designed it well, you'd be able to get some feedback from the students to see what they were doing and how well they're going. Like Carnegie Mellon's online open learning initiative has something like this. They've got a dashboard, and you can see which activities students have completed and what percentage of success they've had and things like that. So this is really nice. The simulation tools, this is sort of the what-if scenarios that you could use with GIS data or with general population data or with something related to a study. We'll talk about that in a second. Discussion forums, people use those frequently to get students to talk to each other to increase interaction. Blogs and journals, productivity tools. We often use productivity tools when we want students to create something. So like PowerPoint, for example, is great for helping students create presentations to the rest of the class or to create multimodal essays or things like that. And so then a lot of times students will go out and do videos, and then they'll put that together and talk about what's going on. So anything to get them to spend more time on with the content, really engaging with that content, really thinking about the skills we want them to develop for the class. And so productivity tools become an important part of that as well. We've done wikis a lot in our writing classes and in some of our senior design courses, for example, where students put together their work and present it, and the wikis become a place for them to do it. We've got a group wiki tool in one of our learning management systems, the Writing Studio, where students in a group can keep the wiki private and then eventually share it with the whole class so that people can see it. And of course, e-portfolios are another way of engaging students. These are all useful tools. In terms of an example of this, we're looking at using GIS tools in microbiology. So we have an introductory microbiology course. It's part of our College of Vet Medicine and biomedical sciences. And they worked with the geospatial centroid and our instructional designers, and they put together an application to track the spread of West Nile virus by mosquitoes. We have a number of deaths out here each year from West Nile virus that's moved across the country and made its way to Colorado. And we really wanted to get students to start thinking about this by manipulating data. And so what they got was a tool that kind of looked like this. You could look at things, where are the mosquito traps located in the Fort Collins area, and in the next slide it's what's the distribution of species of types of mosquitoes at each site, and it tells you what type there are, the Culex tarsalis blue. I don't know what all these things mean, but one of them carries the West Nile virus, and I think the other one doesn't as much, so it's kind of interesting. And then these guys actually wrote a little brief on this that explained what they were doing, and I put this in here in the slides so that you could take a look at it later on if you wanted to learn more about it. We also looked at interaction and feedback to students, and if you think about that, there's a million things you can do, and I think most of us are familiar with a lot of these, particularly discussion forums and email and chat. Chat works pretty well. We've actually started working with text messaging as well. We've built text messaging into one of our learning management systems, and that's an interesting thing. Students opt in because sometimes they have to pay for it, but increasingly that's not the case. And so they've been using that. It's something that they can always get to. If the professor thinks it's something right away, they can text message and email and post it somewhere. We've used a lot of group tools, and I'm going to show you just a quick example of how you can use those and some of the things that you can do to set up collaboration among groups. Peer review tools, social media sites, file sharing, whiteboards. There's a million things here that you can use. And just like we're using WebEx today, you can use those in your classrooms. And so we use like Blackboard Collaborate, and there are other systems out there that work well for this kind of thing. In terms of group tools, this is an example of how you can support interaction. Typically, they're pretty easy to create. And I'm just going to show you how the following group tool, it supports shared discussion forums just for that group, file folders just for that group, peer review activities that are based on groups, and wikis. And it also allows you to share documents through things like Google Docs or things like that. So we put this together, and you start out, here's your class groups, and this is what students would see my groups. I'm the instructor, so I don't belong to any of this, but this is a course I taught last fall as a freshman composition course. And my students had wanted to work in groups on various projects, so they put together some of the standard stuff like the drinking age and deforestation. It was pretty good. On the next page, you'll see, if you see up here, you see manage your class groups in the right side there. So as a teacher, I click on that, and I have the option to create a group. And there are three options. You can just assign students randomly by saying, I want 3 students per group, and the base name is going to be Portfolio Group 1 or something like that. Or you can assign them alphabetically, or you can do it manually. And then what you end up with when you've done this, you put together that information, you end up with a bunch of groups, and then each group has a home page essentially like this. In this particular one, you can see the members of the group. I blacked out their last names, but they have a picture, and you can click on that to see their class profile and communicate with them that way. There's a group file folder where they can add their own files and do things like that. They can engage in various peer review activities, which are part of this platform. And then you've got the other things, sharing documents, wikis, and discussion forums. And so this is a great way to set up collaborative work, and it's just one example of the kind of ways you can use technology to make your teaching a little bit easier. Okay. So I'm going to wrap up with a couple of observations, and then we can move to discussion. One of the things that I've seen over the years has been this notion that you use technology to accomplish a given set of course goals. It makes perfect sense to me. It really works. But a lot of people have told me over the years, don't ever let technology drive your course decisions. And at first I thought that was a great idea, and frankly I've seen some pretty awful courses in which technology took over, and it's like, what just happened here? Somebody got enamored with a particular type of technology, and the course really went badly. But one thing I have noticed as a writing teacher is that technology has fundamentally changed what it means to write and to be a writer. And that has reinforced for me the idea now, and particularly when we look at social media and some of the new adaptive learning tools that are coming out, that technology actually opens up new possibilities for what we can do in classes. I mean, the way I teach a writing course now is radically different from the way I taught it in the 1980s and 1990s, before the web came around, before people had easy access to a lot of the tools that we have now. And so I teach differently because of the technology. I have different goals because the technology makes new goals possible. And as we look around at our disciplines and we look around at the set of tools that are available to us, it is often the case that there's an interaction with the discipline itself, with what it means to be a professional in a particular area, what it means to really think about the issues that are being raised in a particular area. And so I think it's critical that we look at technology both as a set of tools and as an enabling force that helps us think about what we really want to accomplish in our classrooms. So it opens up possibilities as well as it allows us to accomplish things we've always wanted to do. The second thing I'd say, I'm not a techno enthusiast, although some people have accused me of that. I think it's really important to start slowly with these things. You know, you don't want to just throw yourself in and say, I'm suddenly going to be a techno teacher. I'm suddenly going to use technology in all of my courses. I've learned over the years as I've worked with faculty and helped them develop their skills as teachers, that technology can be a great aid. It can really help a lot. But when people try to do too much, just like with anything, you know, if you're going to introduce active learning into your classrooms, if you're going to try to do experiential learning, if you're going to try to work with service learning, if you try to do too many of these things at once, you go crazy and your work as a teacher and your student learning kind of goes downhill. And so, you know, the advice I'd give is don't try to do too much at first. Build your expertise over time. And you'll find in the long run that you're building a really strong base, and you'll begin to see how you can use things. And as you develop some expertise with certain technologies, you'll just get better and better. And I think that's really important. And the other thing I'd say, the final thing I'd say here is listen to your students. Students are going to bring a lot to your classroom. Some of us, particularly some of us who are older, and I guess I have to include myself in that now, like to tell ourselves that students know so much more about technology than we do. That's true, particularly in terms of consumption of technology. But it turns out that they don't know as much as I thought they did, and that they don't know how to do certain things. So what I've found over time is that my students don't quite have all the skills that I'd kind of naively thought they did. And I have to listen to them when they say they're struggling with something. It may be that they really don't know as much as I thought they did. The other thing is, and I think this is even more important, is that students bring a whole set of expectations to our classrooms. And to most of you, this will probably be a duh kind of thing. But they come in there, if they see you doing something different, they're going to resist. They're very conservative in a lot of ways. They're going to say, wait, this is not the way classes work, and here you're trying to do all these new things, and I'm not sure I like it, and I'm not sure I like the way you're doing this, and this isn't what I thought the class would be. So you need to listen to them. You need to find those points of resistance, those points of lack of expertise that might really shape how you roll out the technology in your classroom and how you use it. And with that in mind, I think we can open this up to discussion, and maybe you can explain how we're going to do this, Becky, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So some of you guys have been using this already, so if you have questions, you can go over to the chat area or to the Q&A over on the right and type in your questions. We do have a couple questions to start. One, and I'm not sure you would know the answer to this, but do you know how effective the tutoring is for language courses?
We haven't done a lot with language courses because they have their own tutoring program in our Department of Foreign Language and Literatures. And so they've had a long time investment in technology. They've done, you know, going way back, they've had the videotape and the audio tape and things like that. But now they've been doing quite a bit more with that. It seems to be working pretty well, but they handle almost all of it. So we haven't been able to assess the effectiveness of tutoring for those courses. And so I don't really actually have an answer for that other than to say that they've been using it for a long time and seem to work well. And I'd be happy to put you in touch if you want to send me an email after this. In fact, I'll put in my email. I'll type that in right now. If you want, I can put you in touch with some of the folks here who have been doing some of these things. And we'll go from there. Let me finish typing this.
That would be great.
No typos, I think. I'll send that. Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
What percentage of courses have changed to Colorado State, and where did you figure out where to start? Which courses to start with?
It's hard to figure out the percentage of courses that have changed. We've been working with the Institute for Learning and Teaching has been developing about 20 courses per year for our face-to-face instruction and about another 95 per year for our online courses. And now that I've taken this new position, everything we've been doing online is going to flow back into the face-to-face courses. So overall, we've probably worked with about 400 or 500 courses over the last 5 years, and some of those more than once. We've done follow-up work on it. We started with what we call our high D, F, and W courses. So students who get a D or an F in the course or who withdraw from the course. And so as an example, some courses nationally have high D, F, and W rates, like the first calculus course or calculus courses in general. They have high non-complete rates. And we looked at that. We looked at our chemistry courses. We looked at our life sciences courses. We looked at some of our engineering courses, physics, some of our sociology and political science courses. All the courses that at our university students struggled with in that first semester or that second semester. That was our initial target rate, was to help increase our overall retention of students, improve their learning. So we started there. We began offering support for those courses. We've found that we've made improvements. We've dropped our D, F, and W rates by 10 percentage points since we got in. So courses that had like a 30 for 30% non-complete rate are down to about 20 points and so on. What we found, though, and this has been a real problem, is that we'll work with a faculty member on a course, and we'll see significant improvements, and then that faculty member will teach the course for a couple of semesters and then move on to another course, and somebody else will come in and teach their course, and they'll often drop some of the innovation because they weren't involved in creating it. So we're working with a new thing now where we're calling it sustainable course development communities, and the goal there is to engage faculty within a department, say 6 or 7 key faculty members in a department, in a discussion that goes over 2 or 3 years where they make decisions about what they want to do with their courses, what kind of innovations they want to make, active learning, experiential learning, flipping the classroom, incorporating various types of technology, maybe changing the curriculum, and what kind of level of challenge they want for their students and how they articulate things, and come to sort of a group consensus about what they want to do. And when that's done, then what we're looking at now is we're going to provide them with money as incentive, and we're going to provide them with resources as incentives to engage in this. And then at the end of this, we think we'll have a much more sustainable approach because there'll be a way, say in physics, this is the way physics teaches things at CSU. This is the way we see ourselves within the discipline. And as an example with technology, there might be 20 different technology tools that they could use in their discipline that would be appropriate. They might decide to focus on 6 of them and say, this is what we're going to focus on. And so they come to that consensus about what they want to do. When one faculty member moves to another course, they've already reached a consensus about what they want to do, and maybe they don't do it exactly the same way, but it would be likely to be more successful, and we wouldn't backslide as much as we've been seeing.
Okay. Do you have any time estimates for how long it takes to redesign a course and what you tell your faculty as far as their time commitment?
Yeah, it takes a while, to do a good job. I initially started out by telling everybody who got involved in this that it was the equivalent of writing a small textbook because they really had to think about what they were doing. They really had to do more. We've actually made it less onerous than that, and we've gone to 2 different approaches. One is where we work with a group of instructional designers. So as an individual faculty member, you might work with a team of 3 instructional designers who are helping you put things together. And they're not working only with you. They're working with several groups. But in that case, depending on what you want to accomplish, you might be looking at a 6-month development time frame to get your course up and running. In other cases we've looked at, we'll work with you to get it in good shape, and then we're going to come back next year, work with you again, and we're going to come back again and work with you again. And so in that case, it's a longer-term commitment, but the intensity is lower, and we try to accomplish very, very concrete things in the meantime. So we've basically looked at 2 approaches. One is a multi-year approach, and the other is sort of a 6 months intensive kind of approach. But we do as much as we can to provide a lot of resources to the faculty member. We also do quite a bit of assessment with that, so we bring our assessment people in to really understand what they're trying to do, and that will involve them with a little bit more work to set up the assessment initially. So it's a bit of work, and that's one of the downsides. So we provide them with an honorarium to participate in the project. With these new sustainable course development communities, we're providing them with a fair amount of resources that they can use to make their lives easier in other ways. That's the theory anyway.
I think I can answer this one. Did you design the web page for your group work? I believe that was part of your learning management system. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. It's the Writing Studio. We started working on that back in 1992 and went to the web in 1996 and released the studio in 2004. So yeah, I did the work on that. It was, it's very much a work in progress. There's always a lot better design that you can come up with, and I keep telling my friends, I'm an English professor, I'm not a web designer, but yeah, I put that together. Yeah.
Related to that, what are your thoughts on the quote-unquote flipped classroom, and how do you feel that would work actually for composition and writing?
Well, I'll say 2 things. At first I thought the flipped classroom was just another buzzword, because in my discipline we've been flipping classrooms since the 1920s. But saying that, and there are disciplines all over the university, instructional design, or interior design, construction management, a number of of courses in the social sciences and the humanities have used, to varying degrees, something that you'd call a flipped classroom model, where you're coming to classes. I mean, a seminar discussion, for example, is a version of a flipped classroom model. But I've become more interested in it as I've seen my colleagues in the STEM disciplines get excited about it, because it's giving them sort of a theoretical framework within which to think about how they could effectively change the way they teach, moving from a lecture-heavy model to a model in which information is distributed outside the classroom, and the classroom becomes a place where you can engage with ideas and develop new skills. So when you combine something like the flipped classroom model in, say, a chemistry course with a study group approach in which we've got study group leaders working in the classroom, and people are doing things like group tests or group quizzes. And there's a really interesting model for that, where they work on half of the questions on a quiz individually, and then they work on the next half as a group. There's some really neat things that they do there. So I'm liking it. I think it's not a new idea in any way, shape, or form, but it's new for certain disciplines, and for those disciplines, I think it's had a really strong positive effect. The one thing I'm seeing that's kind of interesting now is that, you know, the flipped classroom model is all over the place in most of the disciplines that you look at. But there are too many people that want to sort of say the flipped classroom model, like it's like the writing process. I think that's kind of silly. There's just so many different ways of doing it. But now people have set up straw man the flipped classroom model and are starting to critique it and say why this model is wrong. I think that's problematic because there isn't just one model. And then to get back to the writing thing, boy, we've been doing flipped classrooms for a long time. We did a study at CSU, a year-long study of teachers teaching in two different types of classrooms. We had the very same teachers teaching our introductory composition course. At 10 o'clock, they were teaching in a traditional classroom where they were in the front of the class and the students were sitting in rows. And at 11 o'clock, they were teaching in a computer-based classroom. And this was the early 90s, so I mean, you're looking at something new and exciting with computers. And we just asked what happens in the classroom. And we saw the teachers were adopting what is essentially a flipped classroom model in the computer classroom, where they were having students do things and they were interacting with them much more frequently. I think we saw student interaction ratios 3 times as high in the computer classroom, and the number of questions students asking teachers were 2 to 3 times as high as they were in the traditional classroom. Interesting that the teachers initiated the same amount of interaction, but the students really embraced this different approach. So we've been doing those kinds of things. The studio model is a really common model in the university or in the composition programs. And so I think in writing classrooms, it works really well. But we've been doing it for a long time. I don't think it's anything new to the discipline of rhetoric and composition. I don't think it's radically new to like newsroom classes in journalism, for example. I don't think it's new in interior design classes. I don't think it's new in a lot of different places. So it's interesting. I think it's a disciplinary difference in the level of excitement that we're seeing about this.
Cool. And I will say a small plug. There actually is someone talking on Friday at 1 Eastern about flipping the classroom in his approach. So that might be, if you're interested in that. A couple more questions. At Colorado State, does an individual faculty member receive support to redesign if they're interested in it, or does the university or faculty leadership decide which courses are going to get redesigned?
It's ground up, it's bottom up. So we have competitions that we run. We ask faculty to apply. We love it when we see a group of faculty in a department working together on a project. And we encourage that because of things I was saying about sustainability and things like that. From the very start, even though the university was saying we've got problems with these high D, F, and W courses, we encourage individual faculty to participate. In my new role, we're going to change that a little bit in that we do a lot of online course development. And in one of the units that's reporting to me now. And in the past, they've gone to a college and said, hey, you can put your courses online. You can increase your revenue. Won't this be great? I don't think that leading with revenue is the best way to think about teaching and learning. And so I'm really interested in approaching the colleges now and saying, you know, there's a lot of great stuff out there. We have resources available. We'd love to see ways in which we could improve the courses that are being offered, you know, do a better job with teaching and learning. And I will couch all of this very diplomatically. But what we can do is, what's our mission? Our mission as a land-grant university here is to really enhance, to provide a good, solid education to our students and to make a difference in their lives and to improve Colorado and do all those things. I mean, it's a lot of us have that mission, whether we're privates or publics, and it's a really important mission. So I'm going to lead with that. We can improve teaching and learning. And I think at that point, the colleges are going to say yes, and if we put some of these courses online as well, we'll make more revenue. And so we'll have this kind of dual message that this is good, there's an overall good here. And I think some of the administrators are going to be encouraging departments and faculty to participate in this program. So it might be that we'll see a little bit more involvement from administrators asking their faculty to participate. But our primary focus on all of this is to work with the faculty members first, and ideally with groups of faculty members that are motivated to do it.
All right. Last question, I think. Can you tell us what specific actions you took in terms of using technology in your freshman writing class?
Oh, sure. Boy, I did a lot of things. I've been teaching with technology since the mid-1980s, so a lot of this I'll have to think about what I actually did, because a lot of it is just sort of second nature by now. You know, we've got the writing studio, which is a different kind of learning management system. We had originally developed an online writing website called Writing at CSU that it got pretty large. I think we had about 65,000 pages on it at one point, and we had lots of people visiting it. And I got kind of frustrated with it in the late 1990s and started realizing that I really hadn't done anything interesting with this. We'd had more than 300 people working on it, providing great resources. People did really great work on it. But really, we just put things online that we could have as easily published in a textbook or made available through handouts. And I started thinking, well, what should we really do with technology? And talked to my colleagues about it. A lot of us were discussing it. We came up, we said, we think we're asking the wrong question. Rather than how can we use technology to support a writing class, or how can we use technology to support our writing center, we asked the question, how can we support student writers in the act of composing and as they're learning to write? So that changed things, and we started saying, well, they need certain tools, they need this. And so we put together the writing studio and worked on it for about 4 or 5 years and released it in 2004. And the metaphor there is the writing classroom, as opposed to the metaphor for, say, Blackboard, which is the lecture classroom. And Blackboard has become much more sophisticated, as has Canvas, as has Desire to Learn. A lot of the programs that are out there, Sakai, they've all become much more expansive and they can do things. But early on in the 90s, when we were looking at these things, it was like lecture notes, quizzes, all these things that were associated with a really different pedagogy than I was using in writing classrooms. And so we started working on this and just came up with this idea that the metaphor would be the writing classroom and the kinds of things you do there. And the metaphor we use is really kind of that flipped classroom studio model. So we called it the writing studio. So the technology I used was just using the LMS, having students, there's a big social media component to this, so students had to introduce themselves and put pictures in there. It didn't have to be a picture of themselves, it could be a picture of their cat if they wanted. They just participated in discussion forums. We used chat occasionally, not that often, but we used occasionally. We used the text messaging system and email. We used the ePortfolio tool. We used the wiki tool. We used the group tool. We looked at shared documents. It's pretty easy to share a document in Google by URL. So we created a little tool that would allow you just to put in that URL and describe the document, give it a name, and then you could work with that. I'm probably missing stuff. I mean, there's just the normal things like having your syllabus online and we use this little thing called class posts. We developed this little tool. It's on the front page of the class page. And you go in, and if you got a question, you just ask it, or I would use it to get classes started with activities and things like that. So I don't know. I'm probably leaving a lot of stuff out, but that was what I did. It was just kind of we used the writing studio as a focus of a lot of what we did, and then it has wikis and blogs and e-portfolios in it. It has all these other communication tools and things like that.
Fabulous. Well, I think those are all our questions, and I want to thank, this has been a particularly interested group with lots and lots of questions. Mike did post his email address, which he may grow to regret. But if you do have questions, you can ask Mike afterwards. We will also post a recording of this as well as PowerPoints to the website where you registered, and we will send that information to everyone. And I want to thank Mike very much. I think this is obviously a topic of prime importance right now, so thank you very much for taking the time to do this, and thank everyone for coming, and I hope this has been a useful experience.
Well, thank you all very much.
All right. Have a nice afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay.